Okay, ladies.
Okay.
Fire away.
So what inspired you to start writing?
Writing in general?
Yeah.
Really, it was the only thing I was ever good at really at school. You know, I was very poor at practically everything and full of daydreams. So writing seems to be the obvious choice for me really. And yeah, I love books and stories. So you know, it was a kind of secret dream when I was about 14. Because you know, you never met a writer, you never it never seemed quite possible really. But when I left school, I briefly had a job with a newspaper as a journalist, and I decided that actually, do you know what? I really wanted to write books. So I thought, well, you've only got one life, so I might as well go for it. So I'll go for it then. But that was what it is. It's just that it was the only thing I was any good at, and the fact that I love stories very much.
Yeah. So you always wanted to be a writer ever since you can remember?
No, not ever since I can remember. When I was small, I'm big on nature and animals, and I actually used to read a lot of books by a guy called Gerald Darrell.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever come across Gerald Darrell?
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he founded Jersey Zoo. It was about the very first zoo opened especially for conservation, and he had a job going around the world collecting animals for zoos, and I so badly wanted to do that. I mean, I should think that job probably doesn't exist anymore because of conservation issues and so forth.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted to do at one point. A bit like being, you know, an engine driver or something. You know, when you're a kid, you don't really know what you want to do.
Was it hard to get your work published in the beginning?
Yes, it is hard. You have to spend a lot of time writing, and no one ever reads it. You don't get it published. You do feel like a bit of an idiot, by and large. And it's tricky because it is a difficult thing to do, writing fiction. It's very hard, but it's really hard in the sense that you just need a lot of practice. So you just have to keep practicing. However, I do believe that if you practice long enough, you do get there in the end. I really do. So it is practice.
What's your favourite type of genre to write?
Well, I suppose writing for young people is a genre in itself, really. So, but within that, I like all sorts of things. Really, I'm just finishing up a horror now, which has been fun. It's a bit of light relief. But the thing that I suppose I do get the most out of is this business of taking real people's stories. I find real people really mesmerisingly interesting.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk to anyone, they've always got a story hidden somewhere in them, and using that as the basis to imaginatively explore situations and people is what I love the best. It's such an education for me as I write it.
Yeah. Hello. You know when you got criticism for writing junk?
Yeah.
Did that overcome you? Did you kind of want to stop writing, or did that just not bother you?
No, it was great. I positively enjoyed it. I think it's fabulous when you have your work being discussed on a sort of national level. You know, what more could you ask for, really? And although I get criticised sometimes as if I'm a sensationalist, you know, my position, you know, on publishing those sorts of things, junk and doing it, is very well thought out. You know, it's not just sort of, you know, that I think it's going to get a lot of attention. It's that I think there's a proper issue there, and that there's a gap for those kind of things, and that you know, I can fill it, and I can back my case up with a good, clear argument. And by and large, the critics of things like junk and doing it, you know, they don't really have a terribly well thought out position. I don't think. It's usually just that they find it a bit disturbing that you're talking to young people about things that, you know, adults sometimes find uncomfortable, and they just don't like it. I mean, with doing it, you know, which was the sort of boys and sex one, that attracted some vicious criticism of Anne Payne in particular, who was the children's laureate at the time. And but you know, there was no argument there from her. It was just that she found it smutty and she didn't like smut. So, you know, well, I do like smut, so tough, you know. Yeah. I mean, she tried to make an argument out of it, saying, oh, you know, I mean, on the back of that particular book, there's a quote which is, that reading this will put many girls off dating for life. And, you know, it's just such nonsense. It's just ridiculous. So, yeah, I haven't got much respect for those sorts of non-arguments.
What inspired you to write Kill All Enemies?
Well, the book before that was called Nicholas Dane, and that was returning to this business of interviewing real people. It was about abuse in care homes in Manchester, because it had become apparent to me that, you know, we'd always assumed that abuse of that kind, sexual abuse of that kind, was quite a bit rare, but it was becoming apparent that wherever you've got kids who have no one to look after them, that's what happens, unless they're actively protected. It's common, you know. So, and it's, you know, it's that abuse, sexual abuse, it's a very uncomfortable subject, so I put off writing that for a long time. But then in the end I did it by actually talking to people who'd been abused. And, you know, that was great, because inevitably you find that the whole thing's much more complex, much more rich, that the people are much more characterful than you could ever imagine. And using that as the basis to start the story. So I kind of really got, you know, this business of what you might call pound stories, pound literature, you know, beginning with talking to someone and trying to keep their voice and their character and their story as the basis of your ideas and the basis of your book. And I really wanted to do that. And, you know, so Kill All Enemies was the next stage to that, really. And it involved a lot of interviewing people who've been chucked out of school. And again, it's people who haven't really got a voice. You know, people that you always think are going to be difficult and rubbish. You know, and when you get to know them, actually, they're really quite heroic characters in their own way. And so, you know, that's what came out of talking to those people. So that's what it was. It was a kind of desire to sort of create a voice and to show something and to, you know, uncover that there's, you know, real, proper adventures and important human stories going on with people that you just think are bad lots.
We read that before writing the book you spent time visiting pupil referral units in the northwest. Did that help you a lot?
Oh yeah, it's all based on that. It's all based on that. Pupil referral units and stuff in Leeds, you know, in Leeds around the old corn exchange there, the kids used to hang out, all the goths and they had it just like in the book. And I got in touch with a woman who was sort of employed to sort of social work and, you know, hang around and just keep an eye on things. And she showed me around there and she introduced me to the band Kill All Enemies, who I'm still in touch with.
So is it a real band then?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you heard them play or?
Yeah. It's proper good old death metal with a death growl. Yeah. So I think I kind of invented it. I mean, the Jamie character is based on a real person, based on a real person. You know, it's not actually about him. You know, the big guy with the beard is based on Matt, who actually founded the band. And they did play on that PlayStation game, Kill All Enemies, and they did dream about starting the band. I mean, the Billy character never actually sang or played with them. And, she's based on someone in Wirral.
Right.
So, but there is a band called Kill All Enemies. I'm hoping to get a little, if I can manage somehow to have a little launch up in the north, try and get Kill All Enemies to come and play.
That'd be really good.
Although, how that'll work out a book launch, I don't know really. It's not the sort of thing you normally get at a book launch.
So, do you believe that people in like a similar situation to the character in the book can relate to it?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope so. You never know, but you hope so.
Do you plan like the structure of the story first, or do you have an idea and carry on from there?
Well, it varies a bit of both. I mean, this one was really murderously difficult to do, and these kind of things where you've got three fairly separate stories that you've kind of got to bring together are hell on legs because there isn't one direct narrative.
Yes.
Usually my stuff's got a strong narrative which goes through from the beginning to end, and very quickly when you're sort of thinking about the story, you kind of get an idea of how it's going to go. But with this one, it was much trickier. I mean, I was fairly sure that Rob was going to give Philip a kicking.
Yeah.
You know, I was pretty sure early on that Chris was going to fire extinguishers to teachers. How Billy's was going to end, I wasn't sure really, and how to tie them all in together was really quite hard. Yeah. So it does vary. I mean, but I do by and large have a blueprint to go to. I don't just sort of write into nowhere really. In the initial stages when I'm thinking about it, I usually have a few key scenes and a general sort of idea, and I usually write a synopsis before I actually launch off on the whole thing.
Do you aim through your books like Junk to educate teens about drug taking, or is it just more a story?
Well, it does have to be primarily a story. Okay, so that's the first thing, is to make a good story. I think that good stories are, you do learn things from good stories. Education is, particularly the young people who are at school, is a term that I kind of try and avoid really, isn't it? Because it sounds as though you're just concerned with, telling people what's what and so forth. But there is a broader sense in sex education. And for me, I do feel that, if I read a novel, if it's a really good novel, I will come out of it knowing more, and perhaps knowing a bit better, and perhaps being a little broader minded, and a little more understanding. I think that novels are very good at getting under people's skin and exploring characters and their motivation and their relationships. So whenever I write a novel, particularly one which is quite about real life, I regard what I'm doing as sort of setting up characters in a situation and then exploring it imaginatively. Right, so I would expect that I would find out a lot during the process, because it's amazing, the imagination doesn't just sort of carry you away to faraway fairy tale places. It can actually tell you a lot about real things and provide you with a lot of insights by imaginatively exploring something. You understand things in a way that you, in a remarkable way, you can reveal truths to yourself. So I would hope it's a sort of exploration and a journey, a sort of emotional journey, an intellectual journey, an educational journey in that sense for me, and I would hope it would be therefore for people who read it. But my theory on the educational value of novels is that the first person that you've got to educate when you're writing a novel is yourself. And if the writer discovers things writing it, then presumably other people will as well. So my aim isn't to show what I know, but to find out more myself, and then hopefully you can come along on the journey. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So the person that it's educational for is me.
Very controversial, and you were outside of the norm. You were considered in some ways untouchable by a lot of people, whereas now you're mainstream, you're on the curriculum. How do you explain that transformation?
It isn't true that everything I do is mainstream. For starters, just because people know my name and because I'm well known for junk doesn't mean to say that people always are happy to welcome everything that I do. Far from it, really. And you are warned as a writer when you're writing for young adult audiences that if you put sort of sex or swearing or something in your book, that there are librarians in schools who won't have your books there, and that remains the case for all writers and for me as well. I don't get let off any more than anyone else like that, so it does affect your sales. It does affect the number of people that your books reach, because there are always gatekeepers for people this age. Junk has entered the canon, and junk is on the curriculum, and junk is accepted now. And I would put that down to the fact that it was very widely welcomed at the time by librarians. The Carnegie Medal is very well, which it won as a very well respected prize. It's run by librarians who are all very, very well respected, and I think it's probably down to that really. Also, it's taught in schools quite a lot, but it's also taught academically and to people. It's, MAs in creative writing for young people and this sort of thing. It will be taught at that level because it was a sort of groundbreaking book in the sense that it, really before that point, teenage fiction was a bit of a con, and it was for sort of 11 and 12-year-olds really, with very few exceptions. There were some exceptions, people like Aidan Chambers and so forth. But one of the reasons why Junk attracted such a lot of criticism was precisely because it wasn't a proper book for proper teenagers, and it was one of the very few, and very early, and people didn't get that. So a lot of the fuss was because, it's a children's book. Well, it's not a children's book. And so because it was kind of at the beginning of that movement, it's groundbreaking, and it established the genre in that sense. And so it's taught at universities, it's taught to university students, it's taught to people studying creative writing. So it's kind of entered the academic canon as well as the reading canon. So it ticks a lot of boxes academically. It got very well praised, from a literary point of view, and also it was very widely used in terms of sort of with drugs issues, because it was about real people making real decisions, and it came at a time when not a lot of that had been done. Drugs education and drugs, information was much more sort of a moralistic kind of affair rather than a practical thing about this is what happens. This is the cultural milieu in which drugs exist. It was about drugs culture rather than just the drug. So it was widely adopted for that reason. I had a number of drug educators saying, it's one of the very, very few resources we actually have about real people making real decisions. So I think it ticked a lot of boxes for that. So for that reason, it's kind of good that it can, and that is now mainstream. But it remains the case that if you write a dodgy book about difficult subjects, people still shy away from it, whether it's written by me or anyone else. And when I spend sort of 18 months or 2 years doing something like Nicholas Dane, it's not going to get into a lot of schools. It's not going to reach a lot of people. Precisely for that reason.
A follow-up question to that is, how do you tailor your books for a political mood, or how do you consider a political mood when you're writing your novel? So, again, for example, Kill All Enemies, there is a broader cultural mood that tries to explain failures academically to do with people's background or the need to make accommodation to people's background and so on. And your book certainly doesn't do that, but fits into that whole discussion. So it's very timely. It has a different take on it. But how do you kind of match up your feeling of the mood?
The argument about academic success or failure and background, I don't really necessarily think that's one of the things that book deals with. These are people who've been more sort of let down by the education system, I think, and where the main issues of their life are outside of it. So I kind of think, I noticed the figures released today on the news about, those 5 schools that have this massive number of students going to Oxbridge, more than the other remaining 2,000. That's an issue about background and privilege and those kind of things. And I think this one isn't really about academic success. I think it comes at a different level to that. Judging the political mood, I don't know really. I've with my fiction in those things, I haven't always been successful with the political mood. You know, I mean, Nicholas Dane, I was hoping, was something that people might want to talk about, but I think that they're not, actually. People are kind of are now, I mean, if you go back 20 or 30 years, abuse in care homes, sexual abuse to young people, it was something people didn't like to admit at all. And if your child or was abused, or if someone in your institution committed abuse, that person would be moved on, you know, to another institution, and you would want to cover it up because of the sheer shame of it. I think that's so. This is why you get this business where priests or people working in care homes could carry on abusing hundreds of people sometimes over decades because they were just moved on to another place. That has changed, probably less than we think, but it has changed to the extent that people will prosecute now and will go public with it. But they still don't want to get their heads around it. You know, attempt to write a novel which engages about what's going on in those kind of in abusive relationships or with paedophiles. People still don't really want to engage with it, I feel. You know, we haven't got to that point yet. So I'm not sure that it would be entirely accurate to say that I go and judge the political mood. I kind of try and find a way. I do try and find a way of addressing difficult issues where I find them and trying to, you know, uncover them. And novels are very good at shining lights into dark places like that because they are primarily about relationships and character and understanding. So if you can create a convincing character somehow or other, both you and the reader have to have understood that character, which I think can only ever be a beneficial thing. So, you know, my judgment isn't so much in the sense is this sort of, you know, is the public ready for this? It's much more sort of, oh, you know, there's an area there that I can profitably look into that hasn't been looked into enough or at all. That's much more what I'm trying to do. In the case of Kill All Enemies, I don't know. I mean, I have to say, I don't really feel at the moment that those sorts of books are right up there. People aren't terribly interested in books which are interested in that sort of Ken Loach kind of approach of revealing social realities fictionally. I don't think they're terribly popular. I don't think they're terribly in the mood at the moment, you know. But I still do them because that's what I do, and I would expect that as this government goes into its term, they'll become more popular because they tend to under a sort of more right-wing regime, I think. This particular case, really, I think it's much more about trying to just provide a voice, really, for people who perhaps don't have one.
And a very convincing voice from the reviews of these three.
Yes, they're very good, thank you, ladies. I was delighted that you enjoyed the book, really.
Yeah, it's really good.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Honestly, really?
Yeah.
I know it's very difficult to come to someone's house and say I'm reviewing, but that was crap, really.
Yeah, it really good.
We read it in like 2 days, didn't
Did
we?
you? Great. It was, you know, I mean, the thing is, though, when I was doing that work and I was talking to those kids, their stories were just so amazing, you know, and they were amazing. You know, they'd sort of come out of it full of optimism and